Phillips.
Here.
Councilman Casella.
Here.
Supervisor Thurman.
Here, everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, please be seated. So this morning, we're gathered together to continue our series of workshop meetings. This is the second of what may be a third or fourth one coming. I know we're going to talk about the future one, code changes, and some, I think, other projects as well. So welcome everybody here. This morning we have a tight schedule, 2 hours to go through 5-6 items, so hopefully we can make some progress. Some will take more time than others, but I want to say that each one of these projects we have here is very important as we're looking at various aspects of enhancing, improving community. I think as we look at the items relating to different physical infrastructure projects, all these have been ones we've been looking at, talking about, and I think are getting much closer to finalizing. Today is just discussion. If any resolutions come out of this, and hopefully there will be some, then we will address that during our April 11th meeting. So I'd like to start off where Councilman Beal had proposed that we tackle, and hopefully it's not that much, the Town of Wappinger Community Affairs Advisory Council Charter that I had proposed to basically replace and expand upon the former Recreation Committee, which became defunct, when some members, retired, resigned, or also, unfortunately, we had the passing of one of our really important, community members as well. So, today I want to review that. Hopefully, everybody's had a chance to take a look at it. Nothing is sacred in what I propose. It's really a straw man, for discussion. I know we have some, issues that may impact others, such as, we have historically had for the recreation program some form of stipend to encourage volunteerism and participation. We have other organizations that we have similar considerations or may have similar considerations. So we want to be consistent, in how we approach that. So I'll open it to discussion of my fellow board members of, what, if anything, you'd like to see changed or suggestions. So I open the floor for such discussion.
Do you have the draft proposal? I can just take a look at it.
Yeah, I have an extra copy. I can make a couple more copies if people didn't bring
Yeah,
it.
why don't you,
Okay,
if we could.
Jessica,
that'd be
would you
nice.
make a couple more copies?
Excuse me.
Minutes, everything's off.
Oh, I can do it. Mine's warmed up
Yours
in
warmed
my,
up?
yeah. Let me do that.
Thank you.
I'll be right back. Why don't, well, while I'm going, why don't, you maybe start in with Steve, and
Okay.
we'll stake him out on the floor and tar and feather him.
I don't need one copy.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, please.
Angela, and
Please.
Bill, you have one now.
Yes.
Yeah, the senior center one takes like 3 or 4
Okay,
minutes
go ahead. You start with Steve's project.
to warm up.
All right, Steve, based on the project, the amended project list you sent yesterday, I believe it was yesterday. That's the one we have on the desk, correct?
Right, yeah, that's the latest.
All right, so do you guys want to go through each one of these and make sure we agree on the level of priority for each project?
Well, I thought what we were going to do is I thought we were going to give Steve a priority today as to, projects we were looking at. I mean, we can certainly go through the list, but what I did was I made a list of priorities based on in-house vendor projects, and then I call them townwide projects. But I'll, yield to the floor if somebody wants to do a different format.
If we can go through what Steve envisions as his list based on priority, then we could circle back, Al, on your opinion of what the global priorities are, and then we can dig into each one if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
I'm sorry. If we don't do something with it, then it's going to cause further damage to the building. I believe we had gotten a quote to do that for under the $35,000 that would send it out into a public bid. And then the same thing with the carriage house. That is in a deteriorating condition. Unless we do something to stop that, it's going to continue to do so. And that's a building that we actually use for seasonal storage for all of our equipment. Those are the two biggest ones on my list, and you know, for outside contracting. I know we're behind with a couple projects that have been spoken about before. So they're the one, you know, the in-house work, they're the two, there's two of them that I'd like to get done as soon as we finish the Spook Hill job that's under and currently being worked on. And the one is to finish moving the memorial at Mart's to the new location. And then Councilman Phillips had requested park benches down at Quiet Acres, and I would like to get those installed too. You know, after that, then I'm open to suggestions on where we go from there.
Weren't we supposed to install benches at Castle Point?
I have not heard any request for that.
That was on.
Yeah, that was
That's been.
before.
Castle Point?
Yeah.
Yes, we were getting new benches.
I was
That
going to
a
replace
while ago.
bleachers down there, but I didn't recall the benches, and I'm not sure where you want them either. I mean, we can do that. I can put that on the list.
I'll meet you down there. And
Okay.
we'll
Yeah, I
discuss.
think, you know, combination of bleachers and benches.
We're needed there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Supervisor, when you're out of the room, we figured the best approach would be to have Steve go through his project
Sure.
list based on his number one and number two priority, which is the admin building at Carnwath Roof and the Carnwath Carriage House are number one and two. He was going to go through his projects on his list, and then Councilman Casella was going to provide his input with regard to his opinion on global project priority.
Okay, you know, thanks. I jammed the paper machine, so I had to get Jessica to go.
Easily done.
So, yeah, that's fine with me. And then I think each, as we discuss, each councilman, woman, you know, would present other, you know, any other priorities that they would have, like, you know, Angela, I know, has a couple, Bill, you know, Chris, all of us have, so.
Where are you at with starting? I know you're going to pave Robinson Lane. Where are they going?
That's, you guys approved that?
We approved that already.
I'm just wondering if there's a time plan.
The
or-
asphalt plant is not open for, you know, producing asphalt yet, but they are going in there, I believe this coming week, and starting the prep work.
Okay,
So as soon as the asphalt becomes available, then they'll be putting it down.
awesome.
So let me start off, because unless are you all set, Steve? Before I start asking questions?
Well,
And by the way, I want to mention something, if you've already discussed, which I'm finding, you know, the carriage house roof repair.
Right.
Right? So an important aspect of that is that we are having some active discussions with the, what do they call it, Firehouse Historical Association. They're putting some archives up in, you know, in the park for the county fair, right? But they also want to, they're seriously considering putting old, you know, antique fire equipment in the carriage house as a possibility as we look at museums, and then, you know, are considering the possibility of a facade. So that roof becomes, you know, important for a number of reasons. I think as we look at a possible additional museum activities. I've had you know, very good discussions with Adam Roach, who's a resident of the town, but also handles our Veterans Affairs activities in the county and coordinates closely with us. He's definitely committed, you know, for 2023 to look at putting a Veterans Museum out there that would also include equipment that could go inside, you know, and be viewable in that carriage house. That means Steve will have to find another home for his equipment, but good news as far as, I think, getting people out to Carnwath. It's exciting for me.
I remember Joe Incronato at the time when he was legislature had recommended that we do a veterans memorial there a long time ago, so that would be advantageous to everybody.
So with respect to the carriage house, and this has been my opinion all along, if we have a usable structure that we're using for operational purposes, and I know we use it for storage of your assets, if we're going to be using it to store other assets that are connected to a future museum, I think I agree, this is one of the priorities. It's a building that is functional and is used. Same thing with the admin building. The admin building, we put a lot of time and effort into renovating the interior of the admin building for future purpose, and for $35,000 to make sure that roof is properly corrected. And I think a tree went through part of that roof at one point
Yes.
years ago.
Big tree.
So I think that's another priority. I agree with that.
You know, and that was the one where Steve tried to find the
original
company, the
contractor,
original
yeah.
contractor, and they're no longer around, because not only did that repair work, not only was that done improperly, but the whole roof, you know, appears to have not been installed properly, so.
Is that a slate roof?
No, that one's
No.
actually
No.
shingles, yeah,
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
And I think, you know, in the future, you know, Steve certainly keeps a close eye on it, but I want to make sure, John, that as we do a number of these projects, that CPL, you know, our engineers do keep an eye on all the progress, you know, reports, and making sure that they comply, the contractors comply with spec.
Yeah,
you know,
of
that
course.
we
Do we
have.
have
And I've been talking with the attorney on how we can specify that we get the proper contractors in
Right.
the beginning.
Do we have
Well,
any
it's
idea
part
what
of
the
the
cost
contract.
is going to be for
Excuse
the?
me?
Do we have any idea what the cost is going to be for the roof?
It's under 35. I don't recall it. I've got the quote back in my office, and I didn't think to bring it with me, but I know it's under the 35.
Well, then we'll put together
Thank
as a
you.
proposal for the next board
Right.
meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, right, and then you'll give us all the numbers we'll put
Okay.
into.
Steve, what about all the windows and the frames? I know there's a lot of problems with those as well.
This is at the carriage house, and
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
included. The carriage house, I've put down the roof, the windows, and to repoint the bricks. There's a lot of crumbling mortar there
Right.
between the bricks
Yeah.
that should be addressed as well. There's actually, in the rear of the building, there's a small section. It's several layers of bricks thick, and the veneer portion
Broke
is, there's about a 2-foot square section that's fallen out.
So that's part of your major projects that have to be contracted out?
Right, and I think that's probably, you're gonna wanna have an engineered plan for that.
Right.
Just keep in mind, it comes with a price tag of $300,000. So
And
as
and
we're
I'm
looking
just,
at, as we're
that's a
looking to
guess on my
prioritize.
part, it could be more, I don't know. But I know it's not gonna be an inexpensive
Correct.
thing to do.
Well, I think, you know, one of the items that underlies probably every single point we have to discuss is that we, you know, if we get, say, a general understanding or go-ahead, subject to, of course, a number of conditions, we will be actively looking for grant monies as well. And I know that even with respect to some of our parks, you know, the county executive has indicated a willingness to work with us on that. You know, our legislator, Joey Cavazzini, is responsible. You know, that's one of his responsibilities in the legislature. So I think we will be looking, you know, Al, you know, for additional grant funding for much of this, especially this, with this price tag.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we take into account, because there's a lot of money on all these pages
Right.
here that, you know, I know we're not going to do every single one, and it's going to be over a period of time, but let's just be cognizant of, there's some big dollar values here that we need to make sure we can pay for.
I agree.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Steve.
There's a few of these that are already underway on our section of it. We're in the process of replacing the footbridges for Airport Park that
Right.
go across that swale that runs between the fields. We have them prefabricated at the barn. We did that during inclement weather here through the winter. Again, once we finish the Spook Hill project, and we're on a deadline with that project. So we need to get, you know, stay focused on that. But once that's done, then we would move and do these footbridges, which I anticipate just taking a day or two to complete. Some of the camera equipment I have in hand, but we haven't been able to get down to install the stuff. That one, we do have one in-house for Carnwath Barn, but we haven't got down there to put it in yet. Like I mentioned, relocating the memorial. the flagpole has already been installed in the proper location,
Okay.
but we need to do the remainder of the work there.
And then once we get that done, I'd like to have a rededication ceremony, with respect to that memorial. Taking my prerogative, as I said, each council member could have a priority project. My end is Reese Park. Reese Park has been neglected for way too long, but the most important thing, and I just had another report from the trail wardens, is that bridge that was damaged several years ago in the storm, or in one of our storms. That's the big metal bridge, and a tree came down, but also, more importantly, the whole, the pontoons, whatever it is that's holding them up, and the, stream bed are badly eroded. Steve, is certainly well aware we need to remove it, and, I've requested, I think in the past, John, CPL to review that situation, advise us where, one, is the structural integrity of this long metal bridge, and that what it does is it connects both parts of the park that are divided by Hunter's, Creek. Right? And a lot of people use it, especially the Randolph School. And I have a meeting with, the headmaster coming up this week, and he's, I know, going to raise it again rightfully. So we have to look at structural integrity of the bridge. Can it be resoldered, fixed so that it's, safe? And then second is the location along that stream where we can put in the proper footings and to avoid future erosion if possible. So that means that probably the length of the bridge will have to be longer, and we're going to have to look at putting in the proper concrete, rebar, whatever, down into the ground. So, but that's a top priority. And then at the front portion of it, was also the pavement, the parking area, the fence, so that we can make that, a more usable, park, is my interest in
I
getting
actually
parks.
have an appointment with CPL this coming week to
Oh,
do a
good.
field visit there.
Good, yeah.
At one point in time, I believe Bob Gray looked at it.
Right,
I
Bob
think he did
looked at
too,
it, Tom.
yeah.
Right.
um,
Tom Harvey.
Harvey had looked at it.
I think that bridge, I'm sorry, I think that bridge was actually funded with Greenway money originally when they put that in. So there may be opportunities for
Sure.
Greenway grant money on that property.
Yeah, once CPL can give us, a recommendation on what needs to be done, then we can put together whatever paperwork we need to get that done.
Steve, if you get a prefab bridge, could you bring it back there with a lull? Is there access back there?
See, this
for
is,
that?
this is probably the biggest obstacle, is getting the equipment back to the job site. It's very rough terrain going in
Yeah.
from either direction.
So the mini excavator obviously would just be too small to carry something like that.
Yeah, it would have to be constructed on site.
I guess let's look how it was
Yeah.
constructed, right?
Right.
It must have been done on site. It's such a large bridge.
Yeah, I would be very interested
Yeah.
in seeing how they put that
Yeah.
bridge in there, because it was quite a feat to do it.
But, so what happened is,
Accessibility is next to
the
zero.
trees came down and smashed the one side of it, and I don't know if that has caused structural,
Damage.
problems underneath along the
Well,
footbridge
and
or
then
just
the
the
other
railing.
poor thing is the stream has
Yeah.
eroded the banks.
Tremendous erosion.
Where the footings are, and the footings are exposed.
Right.
So,
Okay, go ahead. Thanks.
I'm open to, your comments at this point.
So I'm going to comment. So just a couple of things, and you're right, you have a number of these projects that are already in process now, which I think is great. So thank you. I know that over at Robinson Lane, we're working on a number of things there, between getting the R4 dugout completed, getting R3 knocked down. I know that you're spreading the clay and everything else that's also moving on. So some of the things I would like to take a look at is, from an in-house perspective, is, again, you're kind of working on this already, but, installing the shed with the electric service. I know that you've ordered the equipment. We have approved that. That's something we need to, make sure we get that done. From a Rockingham perspective, I think we need to continue to look at, and this is not on your list, but looking at the trench for the field. That's something that we've got, I think, the CPL looking at. From a Martsfield perspective, we have some nets we need to put up, right? So for the pickleball courts, And if we could power wash the courts, which I think is something you look at. And then I guess there's some repair of asphalting over there too as well on March, which is on your list. And of course, you have to replace the footbridge for airport, which is good. From a vendor out project list, I think Robinson Lane, which Chris talked about already, we're in the process of paving that. Martsfield, one of the things I'd like to look at, which is not on your list, is potential lights for the pickleball, tennis courts, and basketball courts. They're non-operational now, so that's something I would like to see happen. And of course, we talked about potentially paving at Rockingham Field, so that's something we should look at. And then from a townwide perspective, I think there's a couple of things we need to look at. Certainly, Steve, on your list, the stage back wall there at Electric has to be replaced. I think that's something that's important. I think that's a safety issue. The idea of paving the back parking lot, you've seen it before. I think your truck's actually been parked there. You've got the hills kind of in the back. That's a safety issue. We've got some big tree removals we need to do at Schlachthaus Park. And then you've also got the water softener for the boilers in Town Hall. So that's kind of my, I'll call it, high-level list of things that I'm looking at, that I think that if we can try to get some of those things accomplished, it'll go a long ways towards not only the beautification and stuff and helping the work aspects and security aspects from a town perspective, but also go a long way from, doing some of the things residents are looking for us to do at, the various recreational parks.
The only thing I can think of right now is other than these items, is the gazebo. As you know, the seniors want to do some planting out there. It needs some tightening up. There's some spots where
The floor.
the floor and the corners, if we could just get that done before that, was it Earth Day?
Yeah.
When they're gonna be out there. I mean, it doesn't look like it'd be a ton of work to do that. If you could just get that
The
done.
issue is, and I understand exactly what you're saying, it's a small job, but that means I gotta pull the guys off of these other jobs to go do that. And then I get you guys, upset because the other job isn't getting done.
And if,
When I come in each morning, and then if the phone doesn't ring, then I gotta figure out where the guys have to go on this list.
No,
And it changes,
Right.
with a phone call coming in. I just don't have the staff that is required to meet your expectations here.
Steve and I discussed yesterday, I guess, about manpower resources. So I asked them to put together, both, a schedule which gives us the estimate of the manpower resources. I know we've asked for it before, but also, I think he's been interviewing. I think you have out of 25 applicants, only 2, seem to be of strong interest. And I'm just summarizing, Steve's working on the manpower. He'll be coming back to us, in one of the next 2 board meetings to discuss that further. And I think, we need to look at it, but also Steve needs to prioritize from the point of view of the manpower.
Just to give you an idea of what I'm dealing with here, we ran an ad on Indeed for the seasonal position. We probably had about 30 responses. Out of those 30, I selected 20 that I felt were fit for the job. My secretary made phone calls to make appointments. Probably 14 of those actually made the appointments, 3 showed up. And I was able to select 2 out of those 3. But this is what I'm up against, again, trying to fill the positions that we do have available.
And these would be seasonal workers?
And these are seasonal
Yeah,
workers,
sure.
which, pretty much are gonna be dedicated to the groundwork.
Well, that'll hopefully free up some of your folks to be able to do some of the other jobs on the list if you can get those guys on board.
Well, I mean, the grounds crew, it takes 5 and 6 guys to do that on a week, and as soon as we finish one week, we can start all over again the following week. Unless we get a dry spell, and then I certainly do, repurpose them.
Now, do you do some of that yourself?
I try, but with the amount of administration work I have now, I spend at minimum half my day in the office or going to meetings and stuff like that. The other thing I've been doing is repairing the equipment, just so the guys have tools to work with. And that's been consuming all of my time. I haven't actually been getting out to do much field work, other than, I ran over and graded the parking lot at airport one
All right,
afternoon.
thank you, I saw that.
This coming week, I'm scheduled to do the demo work on the R3.
I saw the roofs are
Yeah,
off.
the roofs are off, so I'm
Yep.
gonna take the machine out there with the block. And this is something else I'm working out with the supervisor, is the job titles of the positions that I do have. I'm gonna be speaking with the supervisor and the union representative to try and amend those to include more of the work that is in front of us. Right now, the laborer position is kind of limited in what they're permitted to do.
The
So-
County Civil Service has also indicated, a strong willingness to work with us.
Right, exactly.
Well,
Especially in light of Sarah's leaving.
Hopefully now, with the promotions we just had, we had a couple of those, right? Hopefully that's going to help you out, alleviate some of your workload, or at least
Well,
allow
I mean,
them to do other
it
things.
allows them to perform the work that they had been doing
Okay,
within their job title. It wasn't a real gain in staffing. It was, they were elevated to a level where they can continue to do
Plus, it's
the
motivational.
work.
and,
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen good
Yeah,
attitude and everything as a result of it.
But yeah, in order to do more of these jobs in a specific amount of time, we're going to need more people to do it.
So, for any of our residents, businesses that are watching, we do have, not just the Steve's area, but other areas, openings, and so please, spread the word. It's a
Right.
great environment, we have good benefits and compensation, so we're looking for folks that certainly, if you want an outdoor job, we have a number of good ones there.
What's the age? Let the people know.
Minimum age of 18 because of the machinery that we work with.
So high school,
Yeah,
possible
but I mean-
high school students.
Entry level is not going to do the work that you're asking me to do here.
No, but it might
Cutting.
free up some of the guys from doing that
Yeah.
if these people
Right.
do it.
Yeah, so we'll look at that, Steve, and we'll
Trying
talk
to
some
help
more.
you here.
Yep.
Trying to get you more people.
Yep. Okay, any other comments from our members or even our esteemed engineering consultant on any of Steve's projects?
No, I would just add that, we've been talking to Steve about a lot of these things, and as far as Rockingham goes, we are going to be out there to pick up some additional survey on Tuesday.
Okay,
So
good.
we should have a better answer for the board toward the end of next week.
Okay.
on that.
and that's for the trench specifically?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
I just want to jump back to Councilman Phillips. I'll do the best I can to get out there as soon as we can, but I can't commit to a date. I don't want to tell you something I can't stand behind.
All right, thank you.
Let me just say, I appreciate the list with the projects broken down by contracted projects versus in-house labor projects. I think that's key in order to get things accomplished. I know the feeling of having 12 things on the plate at once. It's very difficult to get anything accomplished when we have 12 priorities, right? So I think the effort is, the intent is to identify the priorities, which you did, with respect to assets that we're using for storage and functional buildings that we need for operational purposes, keeping them operating properly. I think that's where we need to take a look at the infrastructure type projects first before focusing on other projects that are less important from a capital standpoint. Again, with respect to Carnwath, I support utilizing the carriage house for its functional uses, and I think we need to continue to evaluate the structures on the site down there and make some hard decisions this year on where we're going to put money and where we're not going to put money, so that we can be fiscally responsible coming into uncertain times here. So again, I appreciate that. As for Ward 1, Reese Park obviously is important to me as well. It was my Eagle Scout project back in 1994, doing the trails there. That was well before that bridge existed, I believe. But I believe it is a greenway asset. It's part of the Greenway Trail
Yes,
Network.
it is.
I believe there are funding opportunities from that perspective for Reese Park. It's an underutilized park, but again, there's reasons why it's been underutilized. There's some challenges that are specific to that property that we can take a look at a later time. But that said, we do still need to maintain it and make sure the trails are
Right.
are safe. And I think that that's the number one priority, safety, having to do with that bridge that is clearly structurally unsound. With respect to other projects in Ward 1, you know, there's been some buzz about a playground. Still not in a position to discuss location ideas, but I think down the road, we're going to have that conversation. Putting a playground in, as we all know, is a great asset, but can also be a challenge if it attracts a large number of people and you don't have the proper parking and don't have the proper considerations in place. So I'll be looking at a couple locations in my ward and discussing with the residents before bringing it to the town board so that there's no surprises in those areas. But thank you, Steve.
Did we ever figure out about that storage unit down at Reese Park? Isn't there a container or back of a truck body or something?
I haven't been able to find anybody to claim, who lays claim to it. I suspect it is something that Greenway has there, but I don't know who the contact is for Greenway.
Well, I'll ask the trail warden, you know, because I see him probably on a monthly basis.
Okay.
So I'll look into it as I will with
Right.
respect to other grant opportunities. So, yeah, I'll follow up.
I think it is a Greenway asset. It was used for, my understanding is, years ago, it contained tools for the purposes of keeping the trails blazed. I know Joey has information on that, though. Joey can probably provide us with a point of contact if our Greenway rep doesn't.
I agree with Councilman Beal about Carmouth. We have to be diligent on how we spend money in this area. It is an asset, but it's also, in these unprecedented times, we have to be very careful on what we approve in the usage of this area. The parks in our town are very important to our residents, with children, seniors, and the upkeep is paramount for safety and security. So, Steve, I do want to thank you for things that you and your team have done, but unfortunately, this is an ongoing,
Oh, yeah.
very ongoing project on the parks, and it's just something that we have to face as a town and keep safe and upgraded for our residents. So thank you, and we're here to help you.
Any other comments? If not, then.
Just one last comment.
Okay.
So nothing on anything additional to the list. When you complete projects, though, as an example, like you just completed March, thank you very much for taking the tree down. If you have an idea of a status or something of you know, when things are going to be complete, and again, I know it's constantly moving target, but if you have an idea so we can, because residents, you know, get a hold of us and ask us, you know, when is this going to be complete or whatever. If we have an idea, and again, I know you can't give an exact date, but if you have an approximate, you know, so you can kind of give us an idea so we can go back, hey, listen, in 2 weeks.
I can tell you what a goal
Only for a
is,
few.
Okay.
but,
That's
you know, under the current circumstances, there's no way that I can commit to that goal. And I really don't like saying something here in public that I cannot 100% stand behind. The only thing I can tell you is that we are working as hard as we can to get everything done as soon as possible.
And we appreciate that.
But,
Thank you.
you know, the phone rings on a daily basis with an emergency somewhere in town. We have to drop what we're doing and address that, and then go back and you know, and there's a lot of time in the transition from one job to the other to set up and break down, and, you know, so what you think might be just a couple-hour job ends up taking most of the day by the time you get the tools you need and get to the job and pick up and then re-outfit for the job you were on. It's very difficult to keep a
You
schedule
know,
here.
the problem with even general dates, it sets expectations, which
Right.
then people get the date in
And
their
and
mind.
that's the
and
thing.
then
I don't
start
want
hammering away.
I don't want to put a false hope out in front of
Yeah.
somebody. And, you know, I wish I could. I wish I could commit to something and stay on schedule, but just the way we're set up right now, we can't do it.
I understand that, and checkpoints change as things change, but to have a checkpoint is important, and if it does move, these are the reasons why. And it could be as simple as manpower. It could be as simple as Mother Nature. But I think people, when they see that, it helps with hope.
It helps us for the residents too.
And they want to know that.
I've seen it go the other way.
Well, yeah,
Of
more often
course.
than
Yeah.
not, it goes the other way.
Yeah,
is the
Sometimes it
problem.
does.
Spook Hill project is a perfect example of that. The number of complaints that have come from that neighborhood because they're not seeing the progress that they expected to. But COVID hit, we weren't able to get many of the materials that we needed to work on that job, and then everything we do is weather-based.
Of course, and
And-
people need to understand that.
Yeah.
And they need to
But they
understand. No, they do, especially the COVID, because it has
Yeah.
affected everybody's life from work to the judicial system to a lot of things. But people need to know this is on the radar, and I know it's on your radar, but they need to understand this is when we hope to have something done. But it's not going to be done because of a microburst, whatever. But it helps them understand that we're working for them.
Right.
So that would be appreciated.
Well, folks need to, again, understand that we are in an unprecedented supply chain crisis
Yeah.
as well. And we committed $150,000 to the Spook Hill project recently. That was done right here on the record, and that is a monetary commitment that was agreed upon unanimously. That's on top of the in-house, in-kind commitment we've had at that property. So yes, I've heard the same thing. It's taking time to do that project. Again, we've had a pandemic for 2 years with supply chain issues, and our manpower personnel has had to be focused on other things like point of distribution for COVID
Excuse me.
test kits and things like that. These are things that we have to be flexible to meet the expectations of the residents. So, you know, since we're on the record here and this is going to play on the television channel, you know, this board stands behind our staff and our personnel. We understand that we're facing unprecedented challenges on multiple fronts, but we are committed to the projects that we have funded, and we only have so many employees to complete every one of these projects. That's why we're sitting here right now prioritizing and going through and making sure we're on the same page, because sometimes at town board meetings, when it's the fourth or fifth discussion item, frankly, we don't have the ability to put as much time and effort into having this conversation like we're having right now. So I understand what Councilman Casella is saying, looking at targeted timeline targets. I get that. And I also agree that we want to be in a position where we can say that, hey, by the end of this season, we're going to have this done. But that said, we're going to do our best. We can't make an absolute promise because we're still dealing with all these external factors.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. So let's move on to the charter review. You know, anybody have comments based on your additional review?
So I just want to discuss this a little bit. So if you go back to the 1990s here in the town,
Thank you.
in the early 2000s, you'll see the Recreation Commission existed. We've had this conversation before. The Recreation Commission was basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, it was an autonomous entity that had the ability to make decisions separate and distinct from the town board on a number of items. Many of these we still see, we kind of see it today a little bit. They were responsible for field use, they were responsible for the contracts, they were responsible for many of the arrangements that we had with the sports organizations. That Recreation Commission was formally folded at some point, I think in the early 2010s. It still was on the books, but we weren't exercising it. We were using a Recreation Committee model. We felt that a Recreation Committee that was subservient to the town board and was an advisory committee to the town board was a better approach. That was Al Roberts' opinion at the time. It was a situation where having a Recreation Commission was almost like having the tail wagging the dog, because decisions were being made between meetings that we weren't aware of. So I remember formally getting rid of the Recreation Commission in the books, removing it from I think it was in the code, and then adopting the Recreation Committee, which was defined at that time as a committee specific to recreational purposes. I understand the supervisor wants to broaden the intent of that type of an entity to a community affairs advisory council. I just want to make sure we're not going to inadvertently be putting ourselves into an autonomous entity that has governing abilities separate and distinct from the town board.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think, I've attempted in the charter to make it clear that that's not the case. If there is wording that people like to tweak, to further address it, I don't have a problem, but that's certainly the intention, not to make it autonomous.
Well, these all come under what Jessica's doing now, so I guess my question would be to Jessica, what help does she see she needs?
There's a button somewhere.
Okay, I think it's on. I hope it's on. So, we always need help. That goes without saying. I've had a lot of experience with working with the rec committee in the past. It's always an organization that is filled with people with the best of intentions. There's not necessarily always a lot of accountability in terms of what the roles of the people on the committee are and what the role of the committee is. So we've had issues in the past, and we actually have a former rec committee member here, where things can start to happen where you almost have a parallel department to the recreation department. And having helpers is great, but having what sometimes can turn into this parallel department, because you have a group of people who want to see things done and they want to see things done in a specific way, can actually slow down processes. We've seen it happen with some of our events, with Community Day. And it also comes down to you'll have one, maybe two people on a committee who will do a lot and some that don't necessarily step up to it. I've had experiences where a rec committee has, after meeting with them, come and presented a parallel budget to the budget that I presented. So I do worry a little bit about implied authority that can come along with having a committee like this. We have provisions for voting inside of the charter. What does a vote of this committee mean? Does a vote of this committee mean that I will then be complying with the outcome of their vote? Does that mean that that becomes what we're doing? There have been other situations where my recommendation has been completely opposite to that of a committee that we've had. Not that their recommendation was in any way something that they meant to be negative or anything like that, but whose recommendation becomes the recommendation in structures like this?
Well, I think the board does,
So,
yes. So I guess the question is, do you need this? If you don't need any volunteers or any people to help you, then fine, we don't have to do it.
I don't think it's necessarily an issue of volunteerism or help. I think it's an ambiguous authority.
So how do you make it less ambiguous? You've had this for a long time.
Yes, I don't think you can. I don't think you can.
Well, you can. I mean, and don't take offense to this, we need strong leadership, okay? So from and I'm not implying you're not a strong leader. What I'm saying is, when you have this type of entity in place, right, when you have a council or a committee in place that's going to be providing advisory information, that's going to be providing input, that's going to contain a number of personalities, you need to have a person who is going to filter that information properly to the town board, prioritizing it properly, right? I'm not a fan of bureaucracy. I'm also not a fan, in many instances, I'm not a fan of committees, right? So the committee that was designing a horse came up with a zebra. That's basically what happened. You got to be careful, right? So I do have reservation when it comes to creating additional layers that could become bureaucratic, but I think if you read through this particular proposal, I understand what the supervisor is saying
Yeah.
when it has to do with defining specifically what each person on this committee will be responsible for. You know, this to me is a broadened version of the Recreation Committee. This would be a committee that would be more formalized, I think, because previously, towards the end of the last ideation of the Recreation Committee, the roles weren't really clearly defined.
Right.
Right? So anyone that knows anything about volunteer management, if folks don't feel they have a purpose within the entity, they're going to lose motivation and they're going to leave, right? So I think what the intent of this is to ensure that folks have a mission and that the entity is defined properly. The ultimate question is, do we need something this formalized, or do we revert back to a better organized recreation committee that is similar to the mission of this approach? I mean, do we have right now, Jim, a recreation committee still codified within our, I don't know if it's in the code or if it's within?
I think it's done by resolution.
Right.
Okay,
I think it was established by town board resolution.
okay.
One of the things that, back to the history, a recreation commission, and it's authorized by General Municipal Law 243. I pulled up the section, and to your point, it talks about how the committee is organized, says it may accept donations, says it may employ persons, it may enter into contracts, but beyond that, it doesn't say a lot. But recreation commissions that were established under the general municipal law had the authority. They didn't make a budget, but in some respect, they acted in the same manner as a highway superintendent would, where the town board would establish a budget for the department, and the recreation commission then went out and spent the money. That, over the years, the town boards had issues with that, and they went to the committee structure, which was more of an advisory role. In that particular committee, I don't think the duties were necessarily that clear. By way of analogy, Town Law 64 sets forth what the duties of the town board, what the town board is authorized to do. Statute has probably 50 things
Right.
that the town board can do.
Including feeding deer.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, appointing fence viewers and, so, I mean, that's one of the things that I think if you're going to establish a committee like this, and one of the things I think, the one comment that I would make, just from a kind of a public outreach point of view, I think that the title of the committee should include, I think community affairs is good, but I think it should say recreation and community affairs only, because I think there's, I think in the public's mind, if you see community affairs, it doesn't necessarily entice people who are interested in parks, interested in programs for children, things of that nature. I think if you are intending for this committee to be involved with recreation issues, I think you should put that in the name of the committee. But having said that, I think the organization of this is fine. I think what you would do is, after purposes, you just add a section where you specifically set forth what the duties are. I think that the committee should be advisory to the town board to, avoid the conflicts, as Jessica noted, that, I don't think the committee should be in the business of the day-to-day operations of the recreation department. That's what's happened in the past, I think, in the recreation committee.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's created problems, because you kind of had this dual structure of who's running the department and who's not. I think if you make this committee an advisory board from a high-end policy point of this is what the public wants for the recreation department and this is the way town board, we think you should prioritize your budget, allocate people and things of that nature. I think that's good, and I think, you know, to the point of getting people involved, I think it will get you know, involvement in the various issues, and I think, you know, certainly, you know, on the list of things would be Community Day, you know, other events, and I think if the committee would advise the town board directly, you know, as to these are the ways we think you can improve this program or the senior program or, you know, whatever it would be. I think, but to Jessica's point, I think you really need a very clear and distinct org chart or, you know, who they report to directly in the charter. But I think it should be the town board directly rather than the recreation department. It shouldn't be like a subcommittee there, and I think it should really be based more on policy issues than day-to-day operation.
And I think something else that can get tricky in here, and I won't speak for Steve, but I think it's an experience that he's had as well, is advising the board is one thing, but a lot of times what happens is they go directly to me, and demand is a harsh word. I didn't really get demands. Steve got a lot of demands. So we have the work that we're doing, we have what's getting presented to the board, and then we're the recreation committee, and we decided, Steve, you should be working on this. Why isn't this done? Jessica, we said we wanted you to do it this way. Why didn't you do it that way? So these are some of the issues that we've dealt with, and I really hope I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I'm actually willing to speak to that.
Well, I was actually going
Yeah.
to speak up on that too, because what you don't want to
Okay.
do is you don't want
This
to
is
put,
important information
Yeah,
you're bringing out to
yeah.
us.
We-
And
And
I
I'll tell you.
appreciate both of you
Yeah.
being very honest and open. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
and Jim,
I-
thank you for your input, but this is a lot to
Yeah.
process right
And
now.
I will say, I appreciate the supervisor's sentiment in trying to offer us a kind of help. I don't think I've gotten up here with shaking hands to speak since probably the first board meeting I ever spoke at. And it's back. And it's because I don't want to give the impression that I think that there is any kind of poor intention in this. The intention is genuine. The repercussions of it for myself, for Steve, and for other things don't necessarily translate, so.
so I have some of the same concerns that you do. What I don't want to do is have people go directly to Steve. He's already got 100-plus things on his table already today. And for them to go directly to him and say, I need this, this, and this done, that's not fair to Steve. I think that goes as part of his priority list. And so I have issues where I think that I'm okay with them coming to the board, but I don't also want to circumvent your authority as the recreation director, because, again, I don't want this to be a vehicle where they can go around you, come to the board directly, and saying you're not doing your job or whatever. What I want this is to be a group that's going to assist you, as an example, on Community Day.
Yeah.
We always need volunteers. You've got the Easter egg hunt coming up. You need volunteers.
Yeah.
I'm okay with having people do that, being part of a potential board to do that, but I don't want them to be a separate entity where it goes around and says, we're going to go directly to the board. We want Jessica and Steve to do all these different things here. That's not the right way, because I think it takes away from the effect that we thought we were going to have. And this is, to me, is really basically like the recreation department we had before, but it's got to be formalized somewhat different. And we have 14 members that are part of this. It's 11 plus the 3 ex officio people. That's a lot of people to have on a committee to get things done. And I understand that, you know, you want to have volunteers, et cetera, but I think you probably, if you're going to do this, you probably need a smaller group of people to take a look at it. Again, though, the authority and them going around you or Steve can't happen, because then that makes chaos and everything else, and we don't want that. That takes away from all the things you guys are doing today. Figuring out a way to have them help you, because nothing personal, but I think you do need the help
Oh, certainly.
of
Admittedly.
volunteers, but I don't know how to do that today, but, you know, having a committee or some level of committee, I agree to the magnitude it is today, the number, I think it's too big. And again, you want to, you know, make very clear and define what your expectations are, what our expectations are of this particular committee, but they also have to be, you know, in conjunction with what you two are doing, meaning Steve and Jessica are doing today. I don't want to take away any authority that you guys have today, because again, you have plenty on your plate. This is to help you get things done, not so much Steve, because he's got a lot, but more Jessica from a recreation perspective.
Yeah.
And again, I think we do need the help there. The question is, how do you make it work?
Steve, do you want to speak on it? Just on your experience.
Keep it real short. We have to move on to the next topic, because we're not going to get
I've
anywhere
worked
on this.
with the Recreation Committee for quite a period when it was in existence. I have both good and bad experiences with that. The success of the committee depends entirely on the makeup of the membership. Initially, they were an asset to my department. They would identify some issues that needed to be addressed in the parks. I'd add them to my list. Sometimes they would even come up with volunteers to go out and take care of some of these issues. There were occasions, though, where some members of the committee thought that I was at their disposal. And I actually had a committee member come to my office and giving me orders on what I should be doing, you know, in my time here, you know, instead of some of the other jobs that we had in front of us. It can have success. It can go the other way. It's going to have to be monitored pretty closely in order to keep it from getting out of hand.
Thanks for everybody's comments. We'll move on now to the highway garage. You know,
Oh, thank you. Is it off?
yep. John, go ahead.
Okay. So as you know, we had a plan review with members of the town a little over a week ago. Coming out of that meeting, there were some recommendations for minor changes, like adding an eye wash station, making sure that the specs called out the required inspections. So we've addressed all those concerns. We've made some tweaks on our end, especially to the site plan portion of it. I brought the latest and greatest. I don't feel
Why don't
like
you
we-
summarize, you know, for the board, you know, what the latest and greatest includes, you know, giving a high level
Well,
of
really,
the
the
improvements.
biggest difference from what was circulated a little over a week ago was we didn't have our site plan included in the drawing set. And that's really just, it just shows a box where the addition is going to go and a little bit of site work that needs to be done for that building addition. In addition to that, like I said, a recommendation was made to add an eye wash station into the addition. That's now included on the plans. And we also have a draft notice to bidders, which is essentially the language that would go into the paper to put this out to bid. That's ready to go. So if the board is ready, we're ready to work with them on potential dates to have the documents ready, to have a pre-bid meeting, and then decide on when we want the actual bids to come in.
So you know, just in a high-level overview, what we're talking about here is having a new building constructed that will include, you know, the lifts, you know, the mechanics, working bay, which is totally inadequate today, which will go alongside of the existing building.
Correct.
Correct? And then within that, there are a number of features that address the issue of the ability of the mechanics to service the highway equipment and perhaps other equipment over time. Then also, as part of our discussion, we asked the engineers to take a look at that existing building to make sure it's structurally sound. You know, there are some concerns I think Steve has raised with respect to rusting or corrosion of support beams, a roof that is open that could flip up. You know, what we don't want to have is the old building collapse, fall apart, tear down the new building in the event of a windstorm or some other calamity that could hit up at that altitude. So, the engineers are going to be taking a look at it if they haven't already, correct, Steve?
I believe they did make
And then make a recommendation on whether or not there should be anything included in this. This being the new building and any other structural integrity issues that need to be addressed, correct, John?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
if that
right.
summarizes it.
Yep, we did get out there, we looked at the areas of concern. They're not, in our opinion, anything that the
Good.
town needs to be worried about as an imminent danger. And, that you mentioned when we did confirm that this new structure it is wind rated. So
Okay. So, at least, you've confirmed that the existing structure doesn't have to have any major financial, infusion, to remediate it or to reinforce
Right,
it.
but we did.
Minor stuff,
Correct.
is what I hear you
We
saying.
did
Okay,
include
good.
as an alternate to the contract to reskin the building and shore up the roof, replace the
Right.
roof.
Well, I think that's, that is for the board, members, very appropriate, but not, structural. It's going to be partly cosmetic, but also filling in the gaps, because were some issues that Steve had identified that if they weren't addressed, right?
It'll certainly make the building more efficient for heating.
Steve.
There's a lot less.
Thank you.
It'll certainly make the building more efficient for heating because there'll be a lot less heat loss with the new roof and skin on it. There's a lot of damage and openings that need to be addressed.
So there's, 7 or 9 projects out at the garage? It's something like, I don't have the number in front of me. I mean,
Based on the master plan, yeah.
yeah, so is there any reason why we can't go forward with 3 or 4 of them? I mean, believe me, it's taken me 2 years to get to today.
Yeah.
So knowing that, I don't want to wait another 2 years for another project. And like the break room, to me, I mean, from a labor point,
Oh, no,
that's
absolutely,
huge.
it is.
And we know Steve would love to do it. He can't do it.
Right.
So, I mean, are these things that we could
It's,
be running
Yeah.
parallel? I mean,
Well, I mean, obviously, the more we add to this initial bid set, I don't know what the budget is for.
so we did bond, so we have X amount of dollars.
Right.
So if you're building a building, that's one project. If you're reskinning, that's another project. If you're building a break room, that's another project.
Yeah.
Can't you run 3 ongoing, I mean, I know you guys are busy, and you can only do what you can do.
No, you
But-
absolutely can.
Okay.
And that's why we set this initial phase up the
Right,
way
right.
we did, so that the highest priority based on
Right.
the historical discussions was this garage addition, right? And so, but we included some of those other projects like you mentioned as alternates, so that if the prices come in at a reasonable amount, we could add those, and we have the specs and.
And I know we priced it
Place.
a year and a half ago, and prices are way out of whack.
yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
the other thing in this bidding environment, and I think that all of the different jobs, as to John's point, I think in this bidding environment, when you have things that can operate on different time schedules, I think it's very important to do alternates, not only because of pricing, but also because of material availability. One of the things I think I would really be concerned at is with respect to the lifts, and how they may affect the job. If they're not available from a pricing point of view, how do they affect the overall
Everything else.
project?
Right.
And that's one of the things we've seen in a lot, in sewer projects, I work with, a number of different municipalities, and we've had trouble getting valves for
Right.
sewer systems.
Right.
Which have really,
Right.
Delayed projects, to a very lengthy extent. And that's one of the things that, and it's unfortunate because of the nature of the contract, you have to put in a contract schedule, you put it out to bid, it comes back, now you're gonna be, like, the first day, you're putting in change orders to change the schedule on the contract documents because some of the stuff isn't available.
Right.
That may deter bidders, some people may not bid because, they've investigated how difficult it is to get some materials, and they just may say, I'm gonna just go to a more simpler project.
But don't we have a process where we go out there and we do multiple bids? As an example, we're doing the garage, and I agree with Councilman Phillips here. But if you're doing the garage, but aren't we doing multiple bids? So there's things that are independent from the garage itself that we really should be doing at the same time.
Well,
And
that's-
if, oh, by the way, there's a problem with availability of parts, you'll know that ahead of time, because if you don't start that for 6 months after you do the garage, parts may not be available. Now you're talking about, you may wait another 6 months to a year to get it. So why aren't we being more proactive now, trying to pursue getting not just the building done, but other parts of the garage done? We've
Well, I
bonded
think-
for $1.2 million,
No,
so.
but I think John is saying that, they have multiple bids, multiple segments, and then based on where that pricing comes in, he may or may not be able to do it based on the current funding that we have through the bond, right? So then he would have to come back to the board,
Well, then-
because of this problem with price increases
But-
and labor costs. That's
So
what he's
there's
saying.
Okay,
a
well,
couple
but we
there's
understand
a
that.
couple of ways you can do it. You can do it all in one you can do it in one bid specification and do them as alternates, which is probably the best
Right.
way to do it if you get reasonable bids. The other option is to bid each one separately. The problem when you do that is there's a big upfront cost in most contracts for mobilization and demobilization, getting the contractor to the site. If you have 3 separate contracts, you're going to be paying for 3 separate mobilization costs, where if you put it all in one with bid alts, you've only got the one mobilization cost for the contractor. So that's the problem there. If you're going to do it if you're going to bid them all out as separate contracts, theoretically, you could get 3 separate contractors. You're paying for mobilization on all 3 separate
Right.
contracts, and then you're going to have to coordinate the work on all 3 separate contracts.
So the way you bid the job was based on everything done by one contractor, or somebody
Well,
subbing from that one contractor?
There'll be one general contractor, and he can sub to whoever he wants.
So-
Typically,
Right.
so long as they're not on the department list. But that's the best way to approach it. And then what would happen is, if you would come back in this contract process and, the break room alternate has this astronomical, the other problem is the way you bid this is, you're gonna take the lowest, if you look at your alternates, you gotta look at it as to, the first thing you have to say is which alternates are we gonna include in the award. So, what happens is, you've got the garage expansion is the core of the project. That's the one you're looking at. And then
Right.
you've got these other things as alternates. Well, the way you have to award the contract is, you first look at the alternates and say, okay, the break room numbers are all reasonable. So we're gonna include that in what our final award is. But maybe there's another portion of the project where the numbers came in sky high, and the board, but you have to look at the alternates separately, because what winds up happening is, the contractor who bids the garage expansion may have the lowest price, but he may not have the lowest price for the break room. So what you then do is, you total up the base contract, plus the alternates that you're going to award, and whoever is the lowest bidder for that gets all the work. But, it's like an à la carte menu,
Right, right.
where you can say, okay, we don't want alternate D, but we'll take alternate E. So, and then there's nothing that prevents you from going out at a later date
Right.
to rebid alternate D. 6 months from now, 4
Right.
months from now, maybe, you know, the world is less confusing, you can go out and do that. So that's the best way to do it, to get the most bang for your buck. Because if you're gonna do them all as separate jobs and bid them all separately, ultimately, you're probably gonna pay more money primarily because of the administrative costs in the contract.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm looking at is, and I think the board is looking at, I know we gotta go on to the next topic here, but I'm looking at, we want to show some progress, and we've been talking about this for a long time now. I get it, COVID, a number of other things have happened, shortage of supplies, things like that. I get all that, but we want to start showing progress and showing people we're going to be able, the highway team and everybody else, we're going to get this done. And again, it's a safety issue, so we want to
That's
try to
my
get that
concern.
out there as quickly as we can. So if the garage is the first thing we're going to do, right, the bay garage, that's fine, but we should be looking at what's the next step, instead of waiting till, well, this is complete, now we move on to the next one. I think that's,
No, but I think that's what CPL has, Al.
Okay.
Well,
That's
so-
exactly
so
what they're
do you-
doing.
Do you know what is included in the first bid set?
They have the options that, based on this
I
discussion,
mean,
and
as alts,
Yeah,
they're spelled out on the plans. I
Right.
can,
yeah.
if we want to get,
Do you have the bid sheet or no?
I don't have that with me.
Oh, okay.
I think it's on. Sorry.
yeah, no, well, and that's,
There we go. So this would be reskinning the building
Right.
and the roof. Read without my readers. And then the second alternate, remove existing metal roof panels, associated trim, gutters and downspouts, remove existing roof insulation and deck liner to expose existing roof purlins. And then the third alternate would be to replace the overhead doors and frames and all associated items with that, for the existing building.
Are they gonna skim coat that floor, do you know?
In the existing building?
Yeah, because
I-
you need a rough terrain creeper to get underneath that.
Right,
truck.
I don't believe that's included in this.
Just a
particular-
thought.
but you can look at that, right?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
And like Councilman Casella brought up, safety is utmost, so moving on this is paramount as far as safety for the employees that work there.
Right, understood.
Yeah, the only thing that wasn't in there, I think that we were concerned about was with respect to the break room. There is some facility within the new building for the mechanics, to do that, but I think the general break room was not addressed in that particular. If we want to do it, then we can, but I think we need to move with these three items.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you can add it as an
Post
alternate
haste.
if the plan,
Because they're ready to
assume the
move
plans
if
are
we
done.
Well, I
agree
wanted
with
to
it,
go,
yeah.
start with
No, they
that.
have
Oh,
to.
absolutely,
We had talked
Definitely.
about the break room,
Yeah.
and, I mean, it's on the
We need
list.
to do it, and
Let's
that can
include
come
the
out
break room
of
too,
the
then, if we
DB
can.
fund,
We don't-
Yeah.
We
not
don't
out of
have
the bond.
detailed plans for the
Okay.
break room at this
Yeah,
time.
so I
Okay.
think,
Then
get
go-
those plans
yeah.
done, and, whether or not there's sufficient
Yeah.
funds out of the bond, we have sufficient funds in DB, fund
To get this
to
done.
go do that.
Well, I mean, the
So-
other issue too, with respect to the break room, I mean, if you do it as a separate contract and these guys are up there, then they got a leg up as far as the
Okay.
bidding process, so it's definitely not.
Can we do that
It's not a
ultimately as a change
showstopper.
order?
Theoretically.
If we generally put it in, Jim, can it be a change order ultimately?
Possibly.
Yeah. So anyway, but John, go ahead and, do something with the break room draw, but let's not wait on the other three items, right?
I agree.
Yeah,
So we want to move forward with getting this out to bid?
Yes.
And in
Yeah.
the meantime, we're going to
Yeah,
develop the
you
break
can
room.
report at a, near-term board meeting
Sure.
on that, okay?
Definitely.
Now,
Thank you.
so I guess, yeah, I mean, so in that package, the floor, I know the floor, smoothing the floor in the existing buildings was part.
I thought
Is
it
that-
was, but I wasn't sure.
I mean, because this is, I mean, in some respects, this is, you know, a new building, so.
Yeah, that's separate from
Right,
doing the reskimming and stuff. I
Right.
mean, it's, if you've been in there, it's like,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't know
that's,
how these guys get around.
all right, great. I agree, you're fully. Okay, so, look at those, okay, John, but let's
Yep.
go ahead and get this,
Yep.
going.
Very good.
Jim, there's nothing else that the board needs to do, or do we need to make some
not
other?
right now. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's the
you know,
way I see it.
The next call is when it comes
Okay.
back in.
Right.
You'll have,
Yep.
to, you know,
Do a
they'll
resolution.
review it, they'll determine who's the lowest bidder, lowest responsible bidder, and, you know, we can approve the
Okay.
contract.
Yeah, so we'll.
Oh, I
we'll-
guess the only other discussion is, I guess, that you want the bids opened as soon as possible, but you want to have a pre-bid meeting, so.
Yeah,
what do you-
it's typically about for a project like this, about a month process from when they pick up the bid documents.
Oh.
You have a pre-bid meeting.
Let's move it along, because we're also looking at interest rate increases
Yeah, sure.
and other things, so I want to make sure we
Yeah.
get that expedited the
Well, that's
best
the
that you
good thing
can.
about having already bonded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
Right.
got a lower rate already,
No, I know, but still.
but I got you.
yeah, we gotta move it.
Well, my concern is that the contractor's
Right.
costs
Yes.
will rise. So even though we have a bonded amount, the ability to use that will be
Yep.
less
Higher.
effective.
That's kind of like Spook Hill, where you had to get in by a certain
Right.
time to get the price
So,
in.
so just post haste.
What's the, John, is it July 1, the prevailing wage rates change?
That sounds right.
Yeah, it's somewhere around then. I think
Okay.
it is July 1st.
Bite your
Okay.
tongue.
Let's move on. Clear as mud, John?
Of course. No, I
Okay.
think we're good.
Okay, thanks. Midpoint Park, why don't you give us an update? We wanted, you need to review with us what is required by the grant, the $100,000 grant, and, as far as, board action, not today, but our next meeting, and then what other items that you have seen
Yeah,
that we
so
need
there-
to address.
With the notice of the award, they sent basically a checklist of documentation that the town needs to take care of by the end of June. When they announced this, that sounded like we had a lot of time, but we're quickly running out,
Right.
so.
Isn't there an April deadline or something to get something, information in, or a letter?
No, I don't,
Okay,
I'm not aware of any April deadline. There's just, we need to take care of the initial resolution at one of the next meetings if possible.
I thought like in April, check into it, but Jim, I
Now,
think.
that one, John had sent over the resolution, and somehow we're gonna have it on the last meeting, and somehow it.
Okay, well, that's what I was thinking, we need, because I think
We'll
we
have it on
have,
the next meeting.
we have to
because
have it in by the
resolution.
end of April.
Okay.
I think, but anyway, let's double check that and whatever else, because there was also the need to, I think, advise them, with respect to, part of the grant is for engineering fees, correct?
Right.
And
Right.
the most of it goes into the television,
Yes.
viewing of the, lines to
Right.
make sure the I&I issue and whatever else. So,
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah, so we also have a draft engineering agreement ready for your consideration. So that could actually, you could consider that at the same meeting as the resolution, but the resolution does have to proceed.
So the resolutions to approve the EFC grant, is that what that is?
No,
Or what
The
is
grant is
resolution for?
approved, it's with respect to
Yeah,
the
it's
elements of it. They have a
Basically
checklist.
Okay.
accepting their terms.
Okay.
Accepting
Yeah,
their
it's
terms,
actually-
which
It's
are.
checking the, I agree to the terms
Yeah.
on this website.
Yeah, real simple
Okay.
seeker resolution, and then once those initial two items are done, the next item would be preparing a budget and financial plan, and,
Right.
but we need to get at least those first two steps done to move it forward.
Right.
So then you'll start looking at options, engineering options after that?
After the TV work is done, part of our scope is to review all that data and then look at the options that are available to them, whether it be to go to Tri-Muni or East Fishkill
Right.
or,
Okay.
And what
Or
is,
Al's backyard.
yeah,
or we,
how is the grants and stuff like that looking these days?
How are they looking?
I mean, just from the overview, I mean, are they down to zero? You know what I mean?
Like we
Because
got a bunch
there-
from
There's
Wildwood.
times when there's a lot of money out there, and there's times when there's no money out there.
Well, we keep hearing of additional opportunities. It's just matching, marrying up the right project to it. So,
You know,
you know,
The feds approved an infrastructure bill.
Right.
I mean, we talked
Right.
about the COVID funding on a.
Approved but not budgeted.
ARPA.
Right.
Right, so what happened was they put this
Big
pot of
difference.
money out there, but there's no
No
way.
budget, yeah.
And one of the things, the original COVID, and this was a big fight in Congress, and it's very important. The original ARPA, is it ARPA?
ARPA.
ARPA money was allocated to each municipality based on population. The the infrastructure bill that was subsequently passed was not allocated that way. And it's not even clear to me if it was allocated by state. But typically,
Not
money-
yet, Jim, I
Yeah.
think it's not.
and so what happens is the money gets funded, there's federal clean water funding, there's federal drinking water funds that typically come down to the municipalities through EFC, either on a grant program or a loan
Right.
program. And, some of it is based on what your needs are. The DEC order is helpful from the funding lines.
Right.
For the grant, because that's, there's a point system, and you've got to get above a funding line, and if you have enough points to get above the funding line, you qualify for grants, and it depends on, and that funding line varies from year to year, and, if there's this federal money that comes down, it may actually, they may restart the clock again.
Right, that's correct.
And, part of the thing in the funding line is the population, the economic demographics, things of that nature, how dire the need is.
So part of the problem that Governor Hochul is having with getting a budget done, which has met the deadline, is there's no idea as to what is coming from the feds, right? And they fund this because of the various other issues that the administration is having to address in an unexpected way. The monies are not being committed right now, and that's what I think the McConnell was saying the other day. Well, there's been $2 trillion that has been approved, but it hasn't been budgeted. So therein lies the issue. But I think that most clearly, everything I've seen, there will be more monies, and that's why having this discussion, others, we want to get everything done so we can get those applications prepared. Using the engineers, myself, and Scott Williams, so we're ready to get them in.
But
At
just
the
so
point
the
in time.
board knows, since 2011, New York State went to what was called a consolidated funding application.
Right.
Which supposedly was for all the grant money that was out there. It's a misnomer, because there's still different pots of money in various places that they hide for political purposes. But they created this consolidated funding application process. It became known as the Hunger Games, where everybody kind of fought to the death to a certain amount of money. And one of the things was that this CFA process, one of the things they looked at was how many jobs did it create, and, different things like that. Now, the problem becomes, Midpoint Park fixing the sewer is not a job creating, other
not.
than the construction work.
No. I mean, the approach we're taking on that is this is where East Fishkill becomes important, because if we take the line out, depending on how we take the line out,
Right.
it could create 1,000
that's
new
true.
jobs
Right.
in that area. We've done that number crunching with
Correct.
East Fishkill.
Yeah, right.
So that's where the additional federal funding
Right.
could be, very huge. I mean, it could be huge, right, based on that
Yep.
job projection.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Because that means that along 376, basically, those properties could be reconfigured, from what they are now or not being used, like
Right.
Castle and others, to more businesses, including in Fishkill. They have a wide, area that has no job production. So that's what it is. Yeah.
Is there a time period this has to be completed by? I know we're in initial stages and, just going through the EFC grant funding and, we're putting proposals together, looking at whether Tri-Muni or East Fishkill is the right solution. But is there a time period we have to have this completed? Don't tell me ASAP.
Basically now, but,
Well, yeah, I mean,
but they've been working with
The
us because.
application deadline usually is July 31. I
But as far as the decommissioning of the plant and the rebuilding, we're
Well,
under
they're- right.
NOV
They're
now.
not.
But they're working with us because they know that we're working on this.
Okay.
But yeah, it's now.
Yeah, I mean, we don't,
The one we don't have yet is Fleetwood.
the typical process is, DEC will issue the consent, the order, the notice of violation, and then DEC understands that a different part of DEC makes it very
Yeah.
difficult for you to get the
Yeah.
permits to do the work to cure the notice of violation. So they'll work with you, so long as you're on a path to come up with a fix.
Right.
And that's the other issue, why this grant
It's so
program
important.
is
Yeah.
is good, because it actually demonstrates that
Yeah.
we've taken steps,
Right.
to fund the
Okay.
engineering to get the.
Yeah.
Because the thing you don't want to do is just ignore it and hope
No.
it goes away.
Right.
Because that's when they come down on you and then they give you, $30,000 fine per day.
Aye.
And then they'll, waive all but 1,000, they come up with these kind of wacky notices of violation where the town gets hit with a notice of violation of $20 million, but if you fix it within a year, they'll take the 20 million and they'll make it 10,000.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So I think we're moving in the right direction, and we are maintaining the communication with the agency. So that's, so we, once John and Tim, they can get back to us, and we're working with Jim, the resolution, I think, for the next meeting, then that does mean we check off a couple boxes.
Yeah, we have everything ready to go,
Yeah.
so if you would like it to be done at the next meeting.
Yeah, well, let's, plan on doing that,
Yeah.
and then, Jim, you make
Yep.
sure we get the resolution simple, so
yeah,
it shouldn't
and
be
then
anything.
I'm just looking here, according to the engineering planning grant, information that was sent over, it's a 20% match.
Right.
So we've got to pay for 20% of the costs.
You also have the 2022 Dutchess County Municipal Investment
Yes,
Grant, which
exactly.
is, that's right now, an application period right now. And the Federal Hazard Mitigation Grant, which is coming back around, which is looking at wastewater eligibility. There might be some opportunity for wastewater availability within the HMPG.
Right.
Which, that's about 300 million, I think, that is available that they just announced. And Dutchess County will be assisting municipalities with eligibility within that planning process in the next month or so.
Yeah, so we're looking at those bill right now, and there's one other with respect to DCTC, Dutchess County Transportation Council, the highway money. So I've had discussions with both DCTC and NISDOT, with respect to how to enhance the traffic flows, the monitoring, metering on Route 9D. And one of the things that I need to discuss, John, with you and Tim initially, and then the board's involvement is, creating a transit district involving 9D and Route 9. This was suggested by NISDOT, actually, to do that, that would enable us to get a pot of money. That thing could be done with respect to both improving the traffic flows on 9 and 9D, which, can be very important. With the new technology, they're not inclined to widen lanes anymore in areas like that, even if they could, but there's apparently a lot of new technology for sensor lighting and all that controls the flows much better than they did. And I have raised, Angela, very clearly Chelsea Road and that whole area. So
I just want to make a
Very
point
much.
that a roundabout, which is out there being discussed, is not a solution at
No,
Chelsea
that's
Road
not
and 90.
being discussed right now.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
want to make a point.
No, no,
because
that's
the
why we're
traffic-
looking at these other
The
things.
traffic there, people will see at any given time, it's bumper to bumper.
Yeah.
So it's sad that they're not widening 90. That's a problem, but we'll save that.
Well, right now,
We'll
they're saying
save
they're
that
not.
for
We
another
can,
day.
we can address that later,
We'll-
but at
we'll
least
save- There's always hope.
as to traffic flow lights and everything, it's all out of sync. And so that's one thing where there is going to be some grant money available.
Thank
Real
you.
quick, is there a
Okay.
time frame on the new Hackensack?
Well, they're working right now, I think it was spring of next year, or spring, early summer. You know, it's sort of like the same thing that's going on with Old Hopewell, right? They complete phase 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Now they're cleaning up, putting the top coat on and doing a number of things. So that would extend into, I think, next year after the winter. That solution there. And also, as you've seen, they're starting on the preparation for the reconstruction of the bridge across the creek, on 9. So that's, they're taking care of drainage right now. I haven't seen a revised schedule for that. It turns out, I didn't realize it at the time, but, and I think Jim even mentioned it, the bridge is actually owned by the state, but also the village, even though it's in here, in the town, right, and that access, but apparently, we aren't responsible in any way for that, the easements and so
I think
forth.
the village at one point owned the lake.
I think
Yes.
it's
But I'm
Yeah.
not
It still does,
Yeah.
How
yeah.
far up? Because the lake was owned by the bleacher,
right.
and then it went into tax
Right, yeah.
foreclosure, and it was the county transferred the dam and the lake to the village.
Right. And the bridge apparently was
Yeah.
involved in that too, so,
And that park that is located on the corner of List
List
Road is a village park that's outside the boundaries of the village.
yeah.
Yes, in
Yes.
the town.
It's fine
Okay.
It's fine with me. Steve has no problem with that.
No, so he doesn't have, okay, let's move on to the next item, which is one we've discussed before, and I've raised, after windows were replaced without Steve's knowledge way back when, before us, this board, myself, I've, raised the concern on several occasions to Steve and CPL about the need to have proper emergency egress windows for those areas. So, CPL, in working with Steve as well, has come up with a proposal, right, John?
Yeah, and, well, Steve, I don't know if you saw this, but we literally just yesterday got another quote from the same
Okay.
company. It's a very similar window to the one we were looking at, a little over a week ago. It has I'm not a window guy, and our architect hasn't weighed in on it yet, but from what I read, it's just a little bit simpler to open it, the opening mechanism. Like you haven't seen it? No. Okay. So we may need to table this until Steve's had a chance to see it, but we do have 2 options that we think are gonna work.
Well, why don't you summarize for the board
Yeah.
what you're looking at, structurally, even though there may be options on the windows, but just mention, how this would work, because right now, nobody can crawl out of the current windows at all.
Right, so the way these would work is the bottom portion would be of the window would be the part that opens, and then the upper portion of the window would not open, but, or could be screened so that you could have airflow.
But when you say open, it means that the panel
The
really
whole
comes
panel.
out so somebody can
get out.
get
Right.
outside,
Right,
Okay.
which right now we do not have that option in many rooms.
Yeah, we don't.
correct. And
That's
and
right.
there were 4
Frederickson.
locations identified in town hall where we thought these would be key. So the quote is for 4 of these windows. The first one came in just for the materials at a little over $15K, and the one we just got yesterday was for $18K, so slightly higher. But if there's a second that you save because of the easier
Exactly.
opening mechanism, if that's enough to save life,
I think it's a no-brainer, whether it's
What-
15 or
Yeah,
18K.
One of the things I want to make sure you do before coming to the board is make sure it's reviewed with the fire companies,
Oh, sure,
especially Houstonville.
Yeah.
And see what ideas they may have, because that's going to be crucial, because they're also probably going to have to assist And some of that, hopefully, we, get out, but they may have to assist. So I want to make sure that the firehouse, company looks at it.
Then what
Is
we
there
need to
any-
do is, once we put the windows in, we got to make sure people can test it and get out the windows.
No, well, we'll have a fire,
Is-
we'll have to do some, but probably not everyone.
No, I'm just kind of kidding.
Al comes by town hall often, so we'll let him go and
There you
jump
go.
through it.
Is there a problem with supply
I'll test all the
issues?
windows.
Are these in stock?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean,
So they are in stock?
They said they could have these 6 to 8 weeks, so that's a lot better than the 6 to 8 months we're hearing on other things.
Because they're still
Okay.
custom built
Yes.
Okay.
for our size, right, Steve?
Right.
Go ahead, please, just
Yeah,
comment.
he just made, the only thing I was gonna add, he just mentioned it was the cost. I wasn't sure whether that included the installation or not.
That's the
Steve.
material cost. They also provided a quote to do the installation. Basically, they estimate 16 hours to put in the 4 windows at $300 per hour, so add another $5K to those numbers.
And I think this is an instance where contracting out is probably the
wise.
best decision,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I
Because
agree.
they work with it every day,
Right.
and with our backlog of
Right.
jobs.
No, I
It's
agree.
something we should
Right.
probably put out to bid.
Now, you're gonna have to expand, widen some of the narrow windows?
In the 4 locations, I would have to look to see if any of them had to be widened, but that's all included in the
Okay.
scope.
Can you give us the 4 locations too? Because I don't know if the supervisor knows, but we'd like to know what the
Sure.
4 locations are as well.
Okay.
In other words, Frederick, Barbara, I'm imagining, I don't know who the other 2 would be, but I just want to make sure. I've been there enough times where, as Dick says, I'm in there a lot in the office, so I'd be the first one to test them trying to get out.
We also have to make sure that there's, no fire code issues here that
Right.
need to be looked at. The fire inspector should be involved with this process. I mean, this is a situation where we have offices where folks don't have another way to get out, right? They
Right.
have to try to get out into the hallway, and God forbid, we have a threat in the building that prevents them
Right.
from getting out into the hallway. So these egress windows are not just for fire purposes. These could be for any threat that's
Safety.
inside the center of this
Right.
building where they need to evacuate. So certainly, I think that this is something that we need to prioritize. We really haven't had this discussion in previous administrations because, believe it or not, the types of threats that we see today, we were not necessarily seeing as often 5 years ago. And I'd love to think that it's never going to happen here, but we don't want to have that closed-minded perspective. So I think this is purely a public safety and staff safety initiative here that needs to be done right.
Are there any guarantees with these windows, like 5 years, 10 years, anything?
Let's see. I'm sure they offer something. It's probably not in the 5 to 10 year range, but
Yeah, generally, I think they're like 2 or 3 years most
Yeah.
times.
Just,
And that's for the insulating feature of them,
Right.
to guarantee that portion.
Yeah,
There was
we-
a question on where, I can answer 3 of the 4
no, if there's a
locations.
pinhole, they fog up.
Tax assessor's office,
So if there's a pinhole in these
building
windows, they
department,
fog up.
and the accounting
Yeah.
department.
So
I'm
that's
not sure where the
important,
4th
because
one
that
was to
costs
go.
a
There
lot
may
of
be
money to
2
put.
two windows
That should
within
be
one of
included.
those departments.
The reason I asked for size is I could see Frederick getting out of his window.
Right.
Steve, I love you, but I don't see you getting out that window.
Listen, if I gotta get somewhere, I'll go through a brick wall if I have to.
Just get behind them, that's all.
Sometimes my size is an advantage.
But seriously, you're right.
No, it's very, very narrow.
Yeah, it is. You can't get out today.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
also, just let me add this again, if we can ensure that this fire safety divider is working properly, that's something we
Yeah,
need to.
that, I've been looking at that, and I need to double check when that service call is coming in, but that has been scheduled.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So again, John, you review that, and Steve, and then we'll
Yeah,
discuss it with the board and try to get
and
something
we'll try to
proposed.
get in front of the fire inspector
Yes,
as
please.
well.
Yeah.
to-
So based on, the prices that he quoted, one of the questions when you look at issues of this sort, is the question of purchase contract or is it a public works contract? And based on the numbers that John had just given, it sounds like it's a purchase contract rather than, the cost of the installation is a lot less than the cost of the window. So so one of the things we adopted, I guess it's 2 years ago now, is best value. So that gives you a little more flexibility to go to the point that was
Another
raised.
extended.
You know, it may be more beneficial to get a window that you can get out of quicker, even if it costs more money.
Right.
Right.
So under the best value guidelines, it's something you can take.
No, I agree. And, you know,
Totally.
during any
Okay.
emergency, people, you know, need to have the least obstructive way to
Not
exit.
necessarily the least expensive.
No,
Right.
we aren't going to
No, not
go
for
on
safety
expense
and-
on this case. It's
Yeah.
safety
No,
is paramount.
safety is paramount, I agree.
We also need to ensure that we don't have a situation where someone can enter from the outside
Yes.
inside
Right.
using these windows in an easy, manner. So when you look at the different products, we need to ensure that the security level from the inside to outside and the outside to inside is evaluated.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Still gonna need a rock.
True, but when I'm talking about if a window, a large window is open and somebody that, has bad intent is walking by and sees an opportunity, that's where my concern is.
The only other issue, are you looking at anything in the courts?
I don't, that was my question, I'm not sure where the fourth,
That's-
because they have several points of egress there in the.
Right.
in the court of
No,
justice department.
Yeah, I don't think it may not be
Yeah.
an issue, because that's one of the things is, I think if you're looking at replacing anything in the courts, you may have to talk to OCA.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't think it was on there.
No, I mean, they've got a
Right.
separate door in,
Right.
Right.
Can this
Yeah.
be paid for out of B fund,
it'd be a fund that's,
A fund?
yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to the last item on the agenda, and if there's anything else. But one, I think everybody's seen in emails, we have a growing challenge with respect to the water-related issues for emergency services building and also town hall. One is that the wells, don't pass the recent Department of Health reviews, and most likely going forward will continue not to in light of the nature of these wells and the ground conditions. So that means that over time, we have to keep adding more, devices, reverse osmosis or other things that will purify the water. Second is that the water, as Steve has reported to us on several occasions, is having a very corrosive effect and will continue to have that because of the various elements in the water on our town
Pipes.
equipment, and more importantly, in many ways, the emergency services building, which is, the lease agreement is up for renewal this year, and I've told Staff Sergeant Johnson that, we are looking at the water, aspects of it so that they will have pure water. So in that context, we are talking with, and I have another meeting coming up with the Nature Preserve that's off of Old Hopewell Road, Berry Lane, and that's the housing development of 56 units, so that are back there. They've been operating off of their own water well, system, and that is also as many wells, including Mr. Wilson's well, have been failing, Department of Health reviews, and therefore they want to be able to tie into the water line that goes down Old Hopewell. So that we're working on. So the idea is that if that occurs, their back property line, where the line would be going in, and they have a water tank, is fairly close to the town property that houses the emergency services building. So the concept that I've asked CPL to look at, and then CPL and Steve doing cost-benefit analysis, relates to running the line from the emergencies, from, back of Nature Preserve. So we would be involved in that whole process to the emergency services building and to us, and then, extending it out to the road, because as I said, residents like Robbie Wilson, Camelli Drive, Randolph School, all have well issues. And that if we can bring it over here, then it will help to address, I think, several, issues. And I'll let, I'd ask Robbie to come by and just speak on his situation. But that's what we're looking at, and then discussing it, to see if we could use some of the ARPA funding, that we've already gotten, since it's going to benefit, our town emergency, safety, health and welfare, as well as, I think, a decent population in Councilman Beal's ward. And so that's the background to this particular issue. And I've asked CPL to look at it. Steve can give an idea of what, we're looking at right now, back of envelope of cost, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And also keep in mind that all the water that we consume here, drink, is all bottled water at a significant cost, including these, bottles as well. So, and the emergency services building, though, is even a more urgent priority, because they need to be prepared and staffed properly with pure potable water. I think. Bill, you want to make some comments, and I welcome Robbie to talk in a few minutes, just to tell them your plight, which is a plight.
I do have one question. This would go down to 9D?
It could.
Yeah.
Like it could always,
The potential is to do that,
it
yes,
goes all the way
Randolph
down to
School.
9D.
Yeah, if you got it from over to the town property, you could then bring it anywhere you want.
And you
Yeah.
could still go south with that also,
Correct.
potentially,
Correct,
on 9D.
Yeah.
that's the idea, yeah.
So the, in a interesting scenario here, when the nature preserve was built, they basically were building that project when we were negotiating the water line, but there was no possibility for there to be a connection at that point based on the agreement with New York City.
Right.
So fast forward to now, which is 10 or 15 years later, and the nature preserve has its own independent water system. They have a water tank on site. I know that they have had well issues. Obviously, we're adjacent to Hunter Creek, as they are. So my question would be, where the New York City water line is on Old Hopewell Road, there's actually there's a hydrant right there at the entrance to Berry Lane. Is there the option to take the water through that complex, then on into the town, or over to Middle Bush Road from there? Is there a way for the water tower that's on the site of the nature preserve, is there a possibility for that to become a town water tank that can supplement this particular initiative? These are questions that we're going to have to, discuss at some point, but I think we want to get the water from Old Hopewell Road to Middle Bush Road. We want to be able to provide water to the emergency services building in the town hall, but we also want to be able to provide water to the residents that happen to be in that vicinity, including 15 Middle Bush Road, which is across the street, and of course, the residents that are on Pleasant Lane and Camellia, which is not far from here, the Route 9D corridor, starting with the Randolph School. So how do we get it
Right.
from Old Hopewell Road to Middle Bush
So
Road?
CPL is looking at it. All of the questions you raised have already been asked, Bill, and are being, investigated. I have raised the issue with Nature Preserve about the tank. John's been involved, in their early discussions. We're about ready to get another discussion with Nature Preserve, but that's the question, is whether or not, that pipeline, can move back. We don't know where wetlands are, and so forth, but I'm sure in this case, we could get exemption. And that's what CPL's looking at.
Yeah, I don't even know what the pipes are in the ground in Nature Preserve. I don't know what.
Well, and that's the,
We don't.
we should have plans from when it was
Right.
approved. I'm looking at the subdivision plat. And there's the sewer, the trunk sewer line runs through the nature preserve property.
Okay.
So there's an easement for sewer. The one thing though is there's always separation requirements between the water and sewer lines. But the one thing is, you're gonna have to cross Hunter's Creek to get from Old Hopewell Road to here, which typically would require boring under the creek, I would assume.
Right. Yeah.
Which is gonna be, and it's, substantial wetlands and what, whether you put it in the wetlands or bore under the, it's a pretty long stretch, so I don't think you can necessarily bore through the wetlands.
The other option is we own property from this point here straight over to Old Hopewell Road. We own property. I believe there's
It's the same parcel.
It's the same parcel
as
this,
All the way.
Yes.
which goes directly from Old Hopewell Road, and this is to the east of Hunter Creek, to this building, to the emergency services building, which the option could be get it to the street, right? And then bring it from the street back to the nature preserve, if that's a feasible approach.
Well, I mean,
If
the
it is.
nature preserve, I mean, you may not necessarily have, it may not necessarily be cost effective to connect through the nature preserve
Right.
because of the
The creek.
crossing the
You could just
creek.
connect them to this
They can
pipe.
connect to the
To the
pipe.
line, right.
And then,
Right, you
you
wouldn't
know,
bring it
the town can make a connection, and I don't know, I can't recall if there's any plans, any connections in the main on Old Hopewell Road that contemplated a T on the town property there.
I don't think that was even discussed at that point.
You know, because the other thing is, it might be more beneficial. The costs of, you know, the one thing that has to be investigated is whether the infrastructure within the nature preserve
Right.
is capable of serving as a transmission
Right.
main
It may not.
to service multiple
Right.
properties.
Yeah, and that's what CPL is looking into.
And so, I mean, the other option is to run a main up 9D to Middle Bush Road to get to the town. Because at that point, you're gonna, you know, be serving, you know, you'll pick up all those houses along 9D, the Randolph School potentially, you know, and run it down. But again, you still got a Hunter Creek crossing. And then to
Lot
get
more
from
right of
9D
way.
to here, you still got another wetlands to cross down toward,
Right now, if you come from Old Hopewell Road, we own this property straight
Right.
in to the town hall in the emergency services building, right? We also own the property that runs to the cul-de-sac of Pleasant Lane and Camellia.
Right.
Which can
Yes.
put it right into that neighborhood. So all this property right here happens to be our property anyway, and that's east of Hunter Creek. So
Right.
that may be a project all in itself, right? Connecting the nature preserve may be as simple as
click
just,
on the wetlands tab though.
Yeah,
well,
watch it light up green.
I understand that, but, you know, if you're closer to this side here, you may be somewhat clear.
Right.
Anyway, over here at Nature Preserve, though, they already have the water line passing their main thoroughfare.
Correct.
So, I mean, that might just be as simple as connecting from the curb
Right.
to
That's
the.
what I'm
There
hoping,
are
you know.
provisions that were
Would be
made in
nice.
terms of nature preserve when it was laid out.
Do we have a ballpark cost on all this?
No, that's what CPL is looking at right now.
This is way early. I mean,
Yeah.
we're looking down, this is a major project looking down the road. I mean, I think, yes, it can be supplemented with some of the ARPA money, but,
Sure.
you know, we're getting $2 million of ARPA money, so this is gonna be more than a $2 million
yeah.
job.
I mean, years ago, I think this was, well, I shouldn't say that, because, you know, there's been studies for expanding the water system, you know, along Middle Bush Road, you know, over time, but I don't recall looking at an expansion after the DEP water line was put in.
No, I have not seen any analysis of that.
So,
So the reason why you're talking about now is combination
Right.
nature preserve, but we're at a major
Yeah.
cost influx point with
Yeah.
what's going to need to be done to upgrade the emergency services building and this building, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars initially, you know,
Well,
let
the other-
alone long-term
The other thing we
costs.
looked at too, and we were talking with Frederick on the other day, is he's going to do a cost analysis for the savings that you'd incur. So as an example, Dick was talking about the water, but there's other savings from, say, equipment and stuff that you're not going to have to pay, say, necessarily service charges because things are corroding, et cetera. So you're going to get some savings that route too. So it's probably not going to be nearly enough to cover the
No,
2 million
agreed,
plus, but
agreed.
you're going to get some savings, $200,000 a year.
the shortest way to get water to this building is go across the street and connect to the village system.
Right, but again, let me say this on the record. So the infrastructure that's coming into that 1941 building is not anywhere
No.
near what we need. And number two, all due respect to the village, I don't want to put the town campus at the mercy of village water rates outside village pricing.
So are you doing a study to see what's more efficient, to come through the wetlands or come up 9D? Or-
Yeah, that would be part of it.
Okay.
And there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle,
Right.
like Dick was saying. We had that initial meeting with Nature Preserve. They said they were gonna provide all the information they have on their system to us. I haven't seen anything
Yeah,
yet.
that's,
So-
I reminded them of that, so
That will factor into the decision as well, because if there's stuff we can use there, then we,
Exactly.
you know, that becomes part of the town's negotiations to get them in the district and then potentially use some of their infrastructure
Yeah.
to offset some other costs.
Doesn't the planning board have that information?
They might,
Yeah, I
might,
would
yeah.
go to them too, because
But
they
they-
would have had to have something
yeah.
when this was presented to be constructed.
But we asked for like operator reports and things like that the planning board wouldn't have. So the planning board may have the initial plans that were approved, but whether or not it got built that way, I want to see the
I'm
actual
pretty sure it
as-built.
probably was
Right.
built to whatever the
Yeah.
it should have been built to
Of
the
course.
specifications.
Of course.
If it's not, then there's another problem.
Right.
Careful what you ask.
yeah. Since Robbie came, to listen to this, would you like to make a few comments, since you're right across the street from us, and you're plagued by problems, I know.
Just a couple, I thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Is that on?
You guys have already,
See if it's on.
Push until the light goes on.
There you go.
you have already self-explained what's happening. I know it's in the very beginning stages. I'm not gonna sit here all afternoon and bore you with the horror stories. But like you guys attested to, that water is very, very corrosive. I know what it's doing to your buildings here, but just imagine what it's doing to a house.
I know well. I know very well what it
It's
does to the
horrible.
hot water systems.
I have no potable
everything.
water. I haven't for quite a few years now. And it's expensive. I can't sell that house without a working well or having water. It's just not gonna happen. So I would just ask that please keep me included in your talks as you go forward with this, and please do everything you can to make this happen. It's really good news that this is even possible. I hope it happens. So just please keep me advised and let me know where I go next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you.
And while he's here, mention that
It's okay.
part of the issue that he's facing, and others, of course, throughout the town, is when we get these more frequent torrential rains, everything floods into his yard that's coming from here. And we're trying to work, the school district has been more supportive, but there's issues, the county highway, if you look at just the state of the shoulders, poor Robbie's wife got drenched, the mail got drenched in one storm, and it's terrible. So we're looking at how we improve, I think, certainly, Bill, the shoulder repair. If you look at just outside Town Hall, it's all disintegrated. So we're trying to get, the commissioner to give some further look. We had one set of meetings, of course, CPL's been involved, Steve's been involved, looking at the water flow. That also comes into our property. So these are issues that we're trying to address, not just here, but certainly throughout the town, which have been very challenging with all the rain. But Robbie's been very patient, so I'm hoping we can find something that can help there. But also, as Bill said, up at Camelli Drive, and those residents, I've had a few that have come in, I'm sure he has many more, that said, we were promised water way back when, and I have no idea what happened there, but I want to make sure that we do take their issues into consideration, as elsewhere in the town. I mean, Angela has her own amazing set or fearful set of issues on water. So, okay. I don't have anything more. Any other comments or questions?
I want to thank everybody.
Yeah,
And
thank.
thank you
Oh,
for
Robbie,
coming.
what?
Say one more thing.
Yeah.
I want to go back to earlier in the meeting here today. A couple of years ago, I was asked to take over for Joe Ennisser in your Greenway, as the Greenway chairman. So if you're looking for, as soon as I took over, I promised Joe that I wouldn't drop the ball, that all his passion and hard work would move forward. I broke that promise. My health,
Cratered at that time.
yeah, and it just, got left unattended for quite a while.
So are you saying you're still willing to help us on
I'll
that?
help you as much as I can, but I just
Okay.
want to let you know, I have all kinds of paperwork,
Thank
maps, for your bridges that you were talking about before.
Well,
So
I
have
think, you know,
all-
first that we
Thank
look
you.
at, you know, and you could talk, we can talk some more, but Reese Park, you know,
Yes.
and addressing the trails and all those issues and figuring out
Absolutely.
that's a good place to start, right, Bill? I think, you know,
Yeah.
for,
No, I think, and listen, understandably, you had some health issues which are a priority. If you're, I believe you're a wealth of knowledge and a
I
value to
appreciate you
this
stopping
town.
by the other night.
Well, that's, you know, I like to visit once in a while, but
I
not in those
appreciate it.
circumstances. But the point is, if you still want to be involved in assisting with Greenway initiatives in any way,
Okay.
shape, or form, we will find a role for you
Definitely.
to do that,
Could always
because
use you.
I was sitting here thinking during that conversation, you know, if Joe Ennisser was still alive, he would have the answer to those questions.
Yes,
right.
And we have a real gap here now, because Joe is no longer with us. And if you have the ability to put even 50% of that energy in, I think that would be of great value.
Definitely.
I'm in.
okay, thank you,
Done.
Robbie.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very
Well,
much.
we
Thank
got
you.
a lot, we just got a lot of
We got a
accomplished here at
volunteer.
Yeah.
our meeting. But on a,
Right.
you know, seriously though, in
Thank you.
conclusion, I firmly believe that these 2-hour workshop meetings, we are very valuable, okay? And I like to do them each quarter if we
Sure.
can, based on
Absolutely.
workload and based on schedule. I think we were able to focus on, you know, 4 or 5 priorities today that are going to get to the finish line, because we had the opportunity to sit here and discuss them and become more clear on the objectives at hand. So again, I thank everyone for making time on a Saturday to do this.
I
So
think
I
the
have
residents, please, send your
Yeah.
council people notes, your feelings, your feedback on these meetings, or any thoughts that you may have.
Absolutely.
We're here for you. So thank you. And thank you, board, my colleagues, our
Yeah,
consultants.
thanks to the board. I agree with
Cooper and
Councilman Beal
Yeah.
that these are
everybody.
good sessions.
Yeah, Jessica and Steve for coming out.
Seriously, thank you very, very much on a Saturday.
Do I have
Appreciate
a
it.
motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Okay, motion is second. You all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Vote meeting is adjourned. Have a nice day before the rains come tomorrow.
Unlike the other one.